Everybody, and welcome. Today we're learning Chassidus. Just to remind you, we're in this book, Chassidic Discourses of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe just celebrated his festival of his redemption on this week of the 12th and the 13th day of Tammuz in 1927, not so very long ago. If not for the previous Rebbe having been released from his incarceration in Russia, and I spoke about this on Shabbos, there would not be our shul here today. There would be no Chabad Movement International because the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, was the leader of the Chabad movement at that time, and there was no successor. He was on death row, God forbid, for his efforts in expanding Judaism throughout the entire Mother Russia, with a network of over 600 underground schools, yeshivas, mikvahs, shuls, and others. And was in this week that he was redeemed. So it's very meaningful for us to learn this. He actually came to America in 1940. And these discourses that we're learning now were taught between the years of 1941 and 1945. This particular one was in 1943. Let me refresh your memory because it's been a little while since we learned. We started off by introducing that this mimer, this discourse, was taught to American Jews who were grappling not with physical destruction like their brothers in Europe. They were not grappling with academic or intellectual destruction like their brethren in Russia. They were grappling with social or spiritual destruction in the melting pot, the crucible of America. Right? Now, what happened was that these discourses were delivered to breathe life into a failing Jewish community, where Jews came to America and they said, "This is a land which cannot tolerate Judaism." Just like our ancestors coming into the Promised Land, they said, "Sorry, we can't do it. The land eats up its inhabitants. There's no way that we can be Jewish in America. There's no space for tefillin. There's no space for Shabbos." I think the Supreme Court this week or last week ruled that an employer cannot force an employee to work on Shabbos anymore. This is a Supreme Court ruling. You got to look it up. Take a look. Your wife's the judge. Please let me know, because I read about it, just a headline. And if you don't mind, just letting me know the details of it. That'd be great. Thank you. So this is a comatose generation of Jews. And came the previous Rebbe and he delivered this message to America and he said, America is nicht anders. America is no different. America is no different. He took a verse from last week's Torah portion. Mah Tovu alecha Yaakov mishkenasecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, your homes, Israel, which was a verse that was said in the Torah by Bilam, who was the hired hand, the magician, who was hired to curse the Jews. And instead of curses in this last week's Torah portion, the curses turned into blessings. If you don't know the story, highly recommended reading in the world's most popular book, the Bible, portion of Balak. What?
In a unanimous decision, the justices of the Supreme Court made clear that workers who ask for accommodations, such as taking off for the Sabbath, should have their request honored unless the employers show that doing so would result in substantial increased cost to the business.
So I actually do know what I'm talking about, you're saying.
Barely.
Mostly. Good. Thank you. Fact checking the rabbi.
Why would a Shabbos person wouldn't take a job?
But I'm surprised they qualified it. That you could prove that there's.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they qualified it, that they said, but if it's going to cost us too much money, then your religious beliefs go out the window.
You couldn't do that with a pregnant woman.
So, right. It's interesting, the qualification. Yeah, well. No, so how much damage is grievous damage, right?
Right, yeah.
I mean,
the judgment, right?
I mean, your values, my money, yeah,
Right.
depends how much money.
Money.
Right, good. So the way we introduce this discourse, just a quick review, is that we explain that in this verse, the Torah gives two names, speaks of two names of Israel. How goodly are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, your homes, Israel. Right, so we refer to by two names, Jacob and Israel. Why we have two names? Do you go by two names? I guess you have two bank accounts, maybe you need two names, right? But why do Jewish people have two names, Jacob and Israel? What's going on over here? We said that Abraham has only one name, even though his name originally was Avram, and the name was changed to Avraham with an H, row the hay. The Torah says, the Talmud says, you're not allowed to go back to his original name. Same with Sarah. Sarai became Sarah. So why is it that the Torah now, the Torah itself that made the transition of Jacob to Israel, why is it that the Torah itself calls him by both names? Right? So we explained in the previous lesson, we spoke about the divine roots of names. We spoke about that names are not just labels. Names are actually conduits of energy. Your Hebrew name is the channel through which you receive your energy. Much like an email address, the letters, the sequence of the letters of the email address will determine if it goes to your inbox or to my inbox, right? In much the same way that a phone number will determine if it rings in your house or rings in my house, depending on the sequence of the letters. 561, 516, big difference, right?
But what happens if you have two Savis?
What does that mean, two Savis?
Two people named Savi,
That's never the same because what's your father's name?
Louis.
What's his Hebrew name? So you're Tzvi ben Louis. I'm Dovid Tzvi ben Avraham Nachman Shimshon. I'm also Tzvi, but I'm Dovid Tzvi. Dovid Tzvi ben Avraham Nachman Shimshon. It's always different, right? Okay, now, so we explained that the names are very, very, very significant, right? Today, we're going to start answering the question in page 226, bottom of the page. Now, if I remember correctly, this was a little while ago, but I explained that what we're going to say. I'm going to remind you what we're going to say, and then we'll do it inside. So what we're going to say today is that the significance of the name change of Avram was very beautiful. The numerical value, in Hebrew, every letter has a number. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, Dalet is 4, and so on. So Avram is 1 plus 2 plus 200 plus 40, which is 243. What is the significance of the number 243 in Avram's name? Because you have 248 organs in your body, right? I was looking something up, if I can figure something out. Okay, so we have 248 organs in the human body. 5 of them are not under our control. What are the 5 that are not under our control? If I remember correctly, it's the 2 eyes. You cannot control what you see. I'm thinking it's the 2 ears, but it might be the 2 nostrils. Because you really can't control what you smell. But again, you can't control that's 4. And then there's the male organ, which has a mind of its own.
Sometimes.
Okay, so that being said, I'd like to welcome Andrew from Louisville, David from the Bahamas, Terry from Atlanta. What an international class we have here today. Elaine from West Palm Beach, and Corey from Palm Beach Gardens. This is pretty good.
Pretty good.
So those are the 5 organs that are not under our control, right? Avram was one to master 243 organs of his body because he reached the highest degree of self-mastery capable of a human being. Once he reached that stage, God's bestowing upon him the extra hay was not just a symbolic slap on the back, as much as it was an extraordinary gift endowed by the master of the universe, where the numerical value of the letter Hey is 5, because God gave him the key to master the final 5, allowing him to become Avraham, whose numerical value is 248, because now Abraham became a perfect master of himself. He was completely in control of all of his faculties. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I would think.
I mean, do you know anybody who's in control of all of his organs? I mean, besides the President of the United States of America.
He's not in control of his feet.
It's a little satire.
Yeah, sorry. No, but I'm saying you'd think that the President
We haven't seen
of the United States, right, you'd think would be somebody that is the highest, most noble, right?
Abraham Lincoln's probably the last one.
Quote Bob Dylan again. Sometimes even the president of the United States sometimes has to stand naked.
Is that what he said, Bob Dylan?
1965. Yeah.
Really? So it's interesting. Okay, so the idea here is, friends, is that God Almighty is withholding a key from us. You know, there are certain keys that we don't have access to. I'll give you another example of keys that we don't have access to. We have no control over fertility. Do you know that? Fertility, with the greatest advances of medicine to this day, the Torah tells us that there are 3 keys that God doesn't give mankind. One of them is the key to have kids. Even the greatest IVF clinics in the world, you know what their success rate is? Google it. It's like in the 20 percentile.
A
Fact
rabbit
check.
hole for you.
I think it's like 21%, right? Where they say, you know, we can't even creep near the 50% mark of saying it's a 50-50 toss-up. There's the key to longevity. You know, today's scientists and billionaires are trying to fight for immortality. The Torah says it's not happening. You cannot, not until Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, then death will be eradicated. But there's no way for a human being on his own to be able to overcome immortality. Like Jackie Mason says, there's only 2 things you have to do. Only 2 things you have to do: death and taxes. And the third thing is, so there was immortality, there was death, fertility, and wealth. The key to wealth. Who will become rich and who will become poor? Right?
No control over that?
What do you think?
This sounds
I would have
like,
said yes.
So you're telling me
Obviously, I'm wrong.
so you're telling me you think, Chuck, that a person can choose to become wealthy.
Well, they can choose to work or not work.
I said wealthy. I didn't say work.
Can you become a billionaire just because you'd like to?
Exactly.
I'd
I
like
think
to.
there'd be a lot more billionaires
I'd
if
like
that
to,
was
but
the
I-
But there's
case.
a lot, but there's a lot of things
I'd
you
like
can
to
do.
do it, but I'm busy.
I'd like to be a concert pianist, but I can't just sit there and become a concert pianist.
Apparently, you can do that. That key was not taken away from you.
Really?
Apparently, according
Ah,
to
you
this,
see?
I'm gonna
Empowered.
I'm gonna go home and with a candle and start searching.
so everything else you can do.
Well, the same
Apparently, yeah. Now, what's interesting is that in a amazing story in the the Book of Kings, there's a story about the prophet Elijah, who was told by God to go and pay a shiva call to an evil king of Israel. His name was Achav. It wasn't actually Achav. The shiva call was to the guy's name was Chiel Beis Salachmi, Chiel of Bethlehem. This guy violated the curse of Joshua. Joshua was the one who destroyed the city of Jericho when they entered the promised land, right? Joshua made a curse. Whoever rebuilds the city will bury his oldest son when he begins the construction. All his sons will die throughout the construction until when he puts up the gates of the city, his final son will die.
Is this in the book of Joshua?
This is the book of Joshua. So when Chiel Beis Halachmi, under the instruction of his good friend King Achav, the evil king of Israel, when he began to rebuild the city of Jericho, his first son died, and his second son died, and all his sons died, until the final son died in fulfillment of the prophecy of the curse of Joshua, right? So now God tells Elijah the prophet to go pay a shiva call to this guy for his youngest son. Can you imagine? Elijah's like a little indignated. He's like, God, really?
You did this?
Like seriously, you want me to go pay shiva call? So Elijah tells God, he's like, listen, I have a feeling I'm going to lose my temper. It's not going to go well. This shiva call is not going to go well. So God says, whatever you say, whatever comes out of your mouth, I will fulfill.
I will what?
I will fulfill. So Elijah says, you got a deal. So he goes out there, and Elijah's presence, you can just imagine, Elijah shows up, they're like, ooh. And they say,
Did he look like a regular person?
not really. He wore like a big long cloak, whatever. Or maybe that was Samuel.
Like a
Whatever. He looked like Elijah. So listen to the story. Listen to the story. Here's what happened. He shows up, and the conversation goes south very, very quickly, because he says something to the effect of,
What you expect?
I told you so. Okay. So then the king Achav has the audacity to say this. He says, in the Shema Yisrael, King Achav, one thing about him is, as evil as he was and idolatrous as he was, he would study Torah with a passion. He said, interesting guy. And in the merit of his Torah study, in the merit of his studying the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet for Torah study, he merited by God to be given 22 years of monarchy. Interesting, right? Power of Torah. So here he is, this guy, he answers Elijah and he says like this, in the Shema Yisrael prayer, which comes from the Torah, it says over there that if you fulfill my statutes, you will get rain in its time. And if you don't fulfill my statutes, it won't rain. And we see, says Achav the king, it rains. We're idolaters and it rains. So if the words of Moses, really it's the words of God in the Torah, but he attributed it to Moses. If the words of Moses are not fulfilled, because we're idolatrous and it still rains, then why should the words of the student of Joshua, why should we worry about those words? If Moses didn't know what he was talking about, then why should Joshua, a student? This didn't go well with Elijah the prophet. Right? It didn't go over well. Remember, he had the endorsement of God Almighty, right? So he says, that's only because of God's benevolence. From this moment on, I swear to you, not a drop of rain will fall. So now, it stops raining. There's a massive drought, like a 3-year drought. Elijah goes into hiding because the king wants to kill him now, because there's nothing to eat. And God is got his own hands tied, so to speak, anthropomorphically speaking, because God is unable to make it rain, because he said he gave him his power of attorney to Elijah, right? So what are you gonna do? You need a good lawyer to get out of this one. So eventually, what happened was, at the end of the story, is that now Elijah was known to be a man of gevura, of strict discipline. This guy wasn't a nice guy. He was a tough guy. So he was trying to teach them a lesson. He was like, yeah. So eventually God brought about a whole circumstance of events where Elijah needed to bring back someone from the dead. There was a kid that he blessed a woman with, and the kid died, and he needed to bring him back from the dead. So he prays for it, and God says, listen, there's 3 keys, God says to him. There's 3 keys, right? Fertility, life, and wealth. It's basically health, wealth, and babies, right? Health, wealth, and babies, right? And God says, listen, 3 keys. No mortal ever has access to these 3 keys, and certainly not of a majority of the 3 keys. So you already have one. You've already got the wealth, which is rain. Rain is money, right? Makes sense? Yeah?
Well, in an agricultural society, it certainly is.
Yeah. In Hebrew, the word for geshem, rain, also is the same word as physical stuff. Our physical needs is the same word as rain. Because rain represents divine blessing, right? So God says, I can't give you 2 out of 3. You want the blessing for death, life and death, to bring this kid back to life. You're going to have to give me back the other key. So Elijah said, okay, man. He gives it back to God, signs away the power of attorney, and he gets the other one to bring this kid back to life. Why am I telling you this story? Because there are certain keys that God doesn't give mankind except in extraneous circumstances, like Elijah. So when it comes here, there are 5 organs in the human body that we do not have the control over. A masterful human being is able to reach a point that 243 organs of his body are under his control, but the other 5 not. And that's who Avram is. Now we can begin to appreciate what an extraordinary leader is Abraham, or Avram, right? Mm-hmm. Now, in the context of Tanya, which is so fundamental to our worldview, Tanya teaches us that there are 3 kinds of Jews. There's the sinner, called the Rasha. There's the righteous, called the Tzaddik. And then there's the in-betweener, called the Beinani, right? What's the difference between them? We all have 2 souls within us. We have a godly soul and an animal soul that are fighting, a war raging within us, right? The godly soul wants to do the right thing. The animal soul wants to do the selfish thing, right? And how you express it in thought, speech, and action in your garments of your soul is your rational mind's choice, right? If you ever make a mistake, if you ever let go and you allow the animal soul expression, which means in thought, speech, and action, you do a sin, you're a Rasha, you're a wicked person, right? If you never ever sin, then you're a Beinani. Then you're a Beinani. If you never ever sin, this is Tanya, you need to refresh your Tanya. If you never ever sin, then you're a Beinani. What's the difference between a Beinani and a Tzaddik? Yeah. What does a Tzaddik have over a Beinani? What the Tzaddik has over a Beinani is that the Tzaddik reaches a place that the Beinani, by his own human effort, cannot reach on his own. The Tzaddik enters into a club that you cannot access by your own efforts alone. You have to be invited there by heaven. Right? And I often use the example of American Express Black that you can't apply for. You only have to get invited to, right? What this means is that when you've reached the maximum of your human effort, that's when God sees your effort and he grants you access, if he wishes, to this club, where in that club, what happens is your evil inclination is turned off. Your animal soul becomes tamed
That's a subject.
like a bull in a china shop that now becomes a bull that pulls the threshing floor, that goes around the threshing floor. So what happens here is that no longer does the battle rage within. The Beinoni struggles internally, even though externally he never sins. He's a vigilante on the outside, but on the inside he struggles tremendously. That's the Beinoni. That's what the book of Tanya is. It's the book of the Beinoni, because the Alter Rebbe says we all can strive to become Beinonim, even though you can't be a tzaddik on your own. The tzaddik is the one that no longer struggles within himself, which is why King David says in the book of Psalms, "V'libi cholal b'kirbi," and my heart is hollow within me, because he slaughtered it. Ki haragei b'tayni, says the Alter Rebbe, because he murdered his evil inclination. He slaughtered it through fasting. So we can begin to appreciate within the context of Tanya that in our own human efforts, we know what it means to be a Rasha, right? To be a Rasha, be wicked. If you've ever sinned, you ever said Lashon Hara, did any sin you?
Me?
Any sin? Not, okay. Fine. Besides you, Marty. Many of us,
Of course we will.
in our human experience, right? We might have sinned once, maybe once, right? Once, maybe. So then you're a sinner, right? But if you've reached the point now where you reach the point in your life and you say, I'm so inspired, I want to never do that particular sin again. So I teach Tanya compartmentalized. That's how I teach Tanya, compartmentalized. It's not all or nothing.
That's what I remember.
This is how I teach it. So let's talk about not about your entire life. Let's talk about one mitzvah. Let's talk about the mitzvah of not eating crocodile.
Not eating what?
Crocodile.
Crocodile?
Yeah. Have you ever eaten crocodile?
Alligator. We have alligator.
Have you eaten alligator?
Crocodile.
No. Is that one of the mitzvahs?
One of the mitzvahs, yeah, is not to eat a crocodile.
That's true.
Well, I mean, it falls under the laws of kosher, but yeah, it is a mitzvah, yeah.
Okay.
So now, when it comes to the mitzvah of eating crocodile, you're a tzaddik. Have you ever had a desire to eat the crocodile?
No.
So you're a tzaddik. You don't even have the internal struggle. You don't have to say, I really want to eat the crocodile.
You've eaten alligator.
Yeah, but I don't have an urge. It was at a restaurant and it was on the menu, but
But you did.
I didn't have at that moment I had a desire, but I don't have a.
Fine, so you don't have a desire anymore. Well, let's talk about something a little bit more practical. Let's talk about slander. Slander, lashon hara, evil talk. If you've ever spoken evil talk, then you might be a Rusher. But now, let's say this moment you become inspired. You say, you know what? For the next 15 minutes of my life, I will not speak lashon hara. I will not say anything bad about another human being, which basically means do not talk about a human being. As long as you say nothing about a human being, you will not be talking slander, right? So if you make that commitment for the next 15 minutes, then you will have become a Beinoni, which means you still struggle internally because I want to say something. I'm watching the clock because I want to say it, right? But you're not practically doing it. So you've become a Beinoni, right? The tzaddik would mean I no longer have a desire to talk about another human being, right? So that's within our personal experience. Let's apply that to Abram. So Avram now is a 243 Jew. He's reached the highest potential of a human being. When God sees that, just like the Beinoni who's thrown the SOS ring from heaven, and they say, we're going to give you extra assistance, the Beinoni can rise to become a tzaddik by divine invitation. So too with Avram, he starts over 243 that he's reached through his hard work. Avram worked really hard. He lived in a pagan society. I'm sure there was tremendous temptations and seductions, but because he was able to reach 243 limbs that are aligned with the will of God, Hashem gave him the invitation to become Abraham, 248. Let's read that inside. What?
After the binding?
It was soon before the binding, close to the binding. Well, the binding was when Yitzchak, his son, was 36 years old.
Right.
The name change happened before he was born.
That's how he was
37 years. Okay. Let's go. Bottom of page 226. The names of Abraham and Israel differ in that the former Abraham is a replacement name, while the latter is merely a meritorious name. A replacement name, Abraham, replaces the previous name, whereas Yisrael is a meritorious name, which means that it's an added benefits name, but it doesn't replace the previous name. A replacement name is not only more meritorious than the original, it totally displaces it. A meritorious name is loftier than the original, but does not supplant it. It's like an upgrade name, but it's not a replacement name. Thus, the name Yisrael is superior to the name Yaakov, but does not supersede it. We will explain later why Yisrael is higher than Yaakov, what Yisrael represents, what Yaakov represents, not for today's lesson. I spoke about it a little bit on Shabbos. But Avraham and Avram is what we are talking about today, to understand all this in terms of man's spiritual service. The four names Avram, Avraham, Yaakov, and Yisrael reflect four different grades of spiritual service. The first level is that of Avram, followed by Avraham. Our father Avraham began serving God by working on himself. He sought to find merit in others, and he dedicated himself to understanding divinity and acting only with kindness to his fellow man, distributing tzedakah to the needy and helping all the sundry. What does sundry mean?
All else. Right.
Sundry means all else? Is that what it means?
No, sundries are like arming.
Sundry is various items not important enough to be mentioned individually. Big welcome to Warren and Helen from Virginia, and Leah, and Harvey from Chicago. Great, this is beautiful. I love the international study here. What was that? So here's what happened. So Avram worked so hard on himself with tzedakah, kindness to his fellow man, and helping all the sundry, any little unimportant element. Ultimately, he reached such a high level, an assortment. Thank you, Elaine, an assortment. Ultimately, he reached such a high level that he became master over his body. Friends, I want you to meditate on this for a moment. Are you the master of your own body? Wow. And I'm going to, is there a part of your body that you're not a master of? Do your legs carry you to places you're like, I don't know how I got here?
Right. That's all the time.
Do your hands do things that you just
Out of control.
didn't approve of? Probably. Right? I mean, our hands touch things that we're not supposed to touch.
Yeah, like,
Do you ever think thoughts that you didn't want to think? Have you ever done that before?
Sure. Me? Huh.
You know, last night I was at an event, and a brother of one of the local rabbis here, he says to me, he says, Rabbi Vigler, you remember we were in camp together? I says, yeah. He said, this must have been 23 years ago. So he says to me, well, he was the camper, and I was one of the counselors, and he had to give the keynote address at the banquet dinner at the end of camp. And he says, I don't know what to say, but you sat down and you wrote me a speech. I said, oh, was it a good speech? He said, I still remember it today. What was the speech about? He said, it was a speech about how to control your thoughts. So I'm going to mention it to you right now, so you'll see, right? So here's the speech. The story goes about the chassid of the Maggid of Mezrich. The chassid of the Maggid of Mezrich was the Rebbe of the Alter Rebbe. He came to the Maggid of Mezrich and he says, Rebbe, how could I possibly control my thoughts? I don't know how to control my thoughts. Do you know how to control your thoughts? Do you?
no.
Distracted.
How do you control your thoughts? So the Maggid of Mezrich said to him, if you want to know the answer to that question, you have to go to Reb Zev Wolf Kitzis. It's a chassid. He lives somewhere. You have to go find him. He'll give you the answer. Fine. Great. Or he gives him an address, and now I get the answer to my question. He travels, to this place, and it's a far journey. It goes through the night, the winter. He arrives there late at night. There's a blizzard going on. And he's so relieved to see, even though it's late at night, there's a light on, and he sees through the window. The guy's right there, 2-3 feet away from him. And he's studying Torah. It's great. I'm not going to freeze to death out here. He knocks on the window. He says, hey, I'm here, chassid. The guy completely ignores him. Completely. For hours, he's banging on the door, and he's looking at him through the window. The guy's completely ignoring his guest at the front door. After like 2.5 hours, the guy's half dead outside. Right? He opens the door. He says, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to my home. Let me warm you up. Let me give you something to eat. Why are you standing outside? He looks at him and he's like, he's like, couldn't you open the door 2.5 hours ago when I arrived instead of me half freezing to death out here? So he says, Reb Zev Wolf, the host, he says, I am the master of my home. What I don't want to allow access doesn't enter my home. And at that moment, the guest exclaimed that he has found the answer to his question. What was his question?
Okay, how do you master your
Thoughts.
thoughts?
And by him having 2.5 hours being stuck outside the house, he was given a real life experience of what it feels like to be denied access to the home of whom someone else is the master. The answer was that if I'm the master of my home, I only give access to whom I want access into my home. You live in a gated community. If you don't want someone to come to your house, what do? You just don't give them access at the front gate.
Yeah, but the analogy is a master of your mind.
Yeah.
A
And
master-
that was the conscious meditation. That you are the master of your home, and you have to allow access only to whom you wish access. And you can reach this level. This is the avoda of Chassidus. This is the divine service of what it means to be a Chassid, right? So here's what happened. Abraham reached this level. He controlled his thoughts. I want you to realize when you choose a role model, when you seek out someone that you want to connect with, that you want to emulate, when you're looking for a spiritual leader, this is the barometer you should be looking for. Doesn't matter what kind of clothing the person wears. Doesn't matter what kind of speeches the person gives. Doesn't matter if they look photogenic or not, right? When you're looking for a leader, president, someone that could be a role model, this is the barometer you should be looking for, right?
But
There-
you're saying we are the masters of our thoughts.
Yes.
But I mean,
We
is
have
that
the potential.
the potential, not right?
Are you the master of your house? Yes or no?
Yeah, but it's easier to decide who comes into my house than it is what goes through my
Chuck?
brain.
It's the same thing.
But when you're in an active world and you're doing a million things, how many people actually give careful thought to everything that they're doing and everything that they're saying?
So there's another story.
Hmm?
There's another story. Another quick story I want to share with you. Another quick story I want to share with you. So there was two Chassidim. They were riding on a horse and buggy, and they were traveling to somewhere. Right? They were traveling somewhere. I don't know where they were. And while they were talking about Chassidic concepts. They're talking about angels and heavenly spheres, heavenly spiritual truths. And at one point, one Chassid exclaimed to the other, we're talking about angels. The horses, you know what they're thinking about, these two horses at the front? They're thinking about the hay. Und as die Pferden seinen Pferden, seinen die Malachim, nicht kein Malachim. Which means just because, you agree, right? Just because the horses are horses, if die Pferden seinen Pferden. Just because the horses are horses, does that mean that the angels are not angels? So they are thinking about the hay. Does that mean we're not thinking about the angels? So just because you're surrounded by idiots, doesn't mean that you're an idiot too. Just because you're surrounded by people that are not the masters of their home, doesn't mean that you're not the master of yours. Just because you're surrounded by people that are intellectually comatose, that are in a state of spiritual slumber, it doesn't mean that you are also in a state of spiritual slumber. You are the master of your home. And as Andy from Louisville says, your head is your home. It's your most precious piece of real estate. You think you can buy a piece of real estate for $2 million an acre? That's cheap when it comes to this real estate. Tanya chapter 33 tells us that the purpose of creation was to make for God a home in this world. Where do you need to make for God a home in this world? Right here. If you could do it right here, that's the purpose of creation. It's not to build a skyscraper in Manhattan. It's not to build $1 billion flagpole in Vermont. It's in order to build a home for God in this little piece of real estate on top of your shoulders. That's the purpose of creation. And yes, you can. I'm glad that you're reacting the way you are, because it means that I'm hitting a chord.
I understand what you're saying. Just wondering the practicality.
Chuck,
of-
I want to remind you, you come to Chabad not to hear what you want to hear, but to hear what you need to hear. I mean that with my heart and with so much love. Chabad is going to challenge you spiritually. And I'm thrilled that you're feeling the challenge right now. You certainly are feeling the challenges. It's great. And I'm challenging myself right now, by the way. Don't think that I'm preaching, I'm teaching. I am teaching, talking to myself. I just happen to be doing it aloud so you can hear me too. This is real stuff. And it's so exciting when you realize, okay, I'm retired. So maybe I'm over the hill. Maybe I've got nothing else to do with my life. No. This is where the fun starts. Because now I can focus on what's truly valuable in life. My purpose, my mission, my goal, my spiritual divine dispatch, which I haven't had time to think about yet. Oh, it took me 60 years, 70 years, but finally I'm able to do it. Let's do it. Right? Let's do it. And I'm thrilled to challenge you this way. And I'm thrilled that you feel that. Because when we learn about Avraham, you read the Bible, you're like, yeah, Abraham. Yeah, he could have been my neighbor down the street. No. This guy is a whole different caliber. That's what we're experiencing over here. Let's just finish this paragraph. So ultimately, he reached such a high level that he became master of his body, having refined his limbs. There are 5 bodily organs exceedingly difficult to master. Ooh, let's find them. I just found the footnote, guys. Bear with me a moment. I'm going to look it up. I found the footnote. We'll find the 5 organs. Where is it? Just bear with me, folks. Don't run away. The books are out of order, unfortunately.
Nadarim 32b.
Oh, how do you know?
It says it.
It says it.
Okay, guys, don't go. Oh, here it is.
Using the better eye.
Okay, let's see.
What is this?
Oh, so now Warren comes in. Warren's got a curveball here. Warren's not happy with what I just said. Because Warren said he's not the master of his home. His wife is. Okay.
What book are you?
This is the book of the Talmud.
The book of the Talmud.
This is the Talmud.
The
The Talmud. This is what God gave Moses on Mount Sinai.
32b.
This is what God gave Moses on Mount Sinai. And it is the oral Torah. Here it is, folks. We just found it. Ooh. I was right. Okay. The verse states, wisdom strengthens the wise more than 10 rulers. That verse comes from Ecclesiastes. Great read, King Solomon. Wisdom strengthens the wise. This refers to repentance and good deeds, which serve to strengthen a person. More than 10 rulers. That is, more than the 10 limbs through which most of a person's actions are accomplished. Namely, what are the 10 limbs which most of the person's actions are accomplished? The 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the 2 hands, the 2 feet, the tip of the organ of the bris, and the mouth. Not the foreskin. The foreskin's long gone, my friend. Yeah. Okay, hang on. I thought I had it, but maybe I didn't. Oh, here it is. Okay, here it is. Okay, says Rabbi Ami Barabba. Abraham's name is written in the Torah initially as Avram, and later after God told Avram that his name would be changed, is written as Abraham, with the addition of the letter Hey, which is the numerical value of 5. From this we may derive that originally the Holy One, blessed be He, granted Abraham mastery over 243 limbs, and ultimately granted him mastery over all 248 of his limbs. The letter Hey was thus added to Avram's name to demonstrate that he had attained mastery over these 5 additional limbs, and these are they: the 2 eyes, the 2 ears, and the tip of the organ of the bris. There we go. You can take a look at this Talmud if you wish. If anybody wants to analyze the Talmud. All right, let's wrap it up, guys. Let's just wrap this all up. When Avram achieved mastery over the 243 limbs, as indicated by his name Avram, numerically equal to 243, God then granted him the ability to master the remaining 5 as well. This is indicated with the name Avraham, numerically equal to 248. All of Avram's 5 senses and 248 organs were then wholly devoted to God's service. As the Medrash states, quote, the patriarchs were verily the chariot. The patriarchs were a chariot. Just as a wagon exists only to satisfy the needs of its rider, the patriarchs existed only to fulfill the divine will. So now we understand who Avram is, and we understand that when you say Avraham, it's embarrassing. It's like insulting to go back to Avram. But Yaakov and Yisrael are 2 completely different names. We'll talk about that another time. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Happy 4th of July.